Hello, my name's Rosemary. I'm back here today with Chief and Kiwi and another guest here to talk about story time. This is Jeff. Um, and we are doing story time through our new server name, which is Home Unity Project Up. And we are going to continue with our ending to our last story, which was part of the Chief series. And this story is called The Maiden, and Chief will be reading, and we'll be able to discuss it, and then we will do a new story time, new series on it. All right.
Yeah, I'm super excited to end this story and also super excited to begin the next one, whichever one is picked. So, yeah, let's get into it. This is The Maiden. Our story begins of the tale of a beautiful and charming maiden. Nobody knows where she comes from, but it is said that she is the one who deceived the once great chief of legend past. Her beauty is as undeniable as the sunrise each day. She is dressed in only the best clothes, as always, with her leggings being adorned with the quills from the porcupine. As she walks from the lodge of the chief that day, many people move out of her way. This makes her smile, knowing they are beneath her. The same treatment as in the previous village and the countless ones before. Her steps carry her to the lodge of the medicine man, who she knows is out completing his duties for that day. But the maiden is not interested in having any words with the medicine man. It is his many ceremonial powders he has stored in his lodge. As she rummages around looking for the right powder, she is interrupted by the medicine man's aide, who had come back to the lodge to fetch something for the medicine man. Surprised to see anyone in the lodge, she turns and runs. She curses to herself, and makes haste to leave the lodge before discovered by anyone else. She then returns to the lodge of the chief and approaches him. The maiden lifts the chief's head and from her pocket produces a pouch, from which she produces a pinch of powder and blows it into his face. Her eyes darken as she tells him, "You will tell your people that our lodge needs to be expanded and that all work will stop until the work is completed." With that, the chief's head falls back down to his chest as he repeats what she has said over and over, almost chanting while doing so. With this done, she begins to think of a way to steal more powder from the medicine man for when she leaves this pitiful village. That was the day something evil seemed to take over the mind of the chief. Where once there were smiles and laughs, now there were eyes that only looked at the chief's feet as he walked through the village each day, and only whispered conversation about the goings on in the village. The most concerning thing to the people was that the chief no longer offered any prayers for the people. He only demanded that they work harder and faster, and had the ever increasing need to oversee even the smallest of tasks. The people of the village, even the smallest of tasks, had the people of the village fearing to even speak, even amongst themselves, be it while they worked or when they were back in their lodges at night. It is said that many days passed with things in the village becoming more and more unpleasant, with the result being less and less people even leaving their lodges in those passing days. But the chief saw none of this, for all he wanted was to dominate his people, and so the people secretly sent word throughout the village that they did not deserve to be treated as lesser than the chief. They all contributed to the village. They had helped it grow and prosper. So one night, as the chief lay sleeping, the people of the village left, for they had packed everything they owned that day. And when the chief awoke that next morning, all he heard was the wind blowing through the trees that surrounded his once joyful village. The end.
Thank you. I actually like how it tied in with the first parts of it. You get more into the maiden side of it, her perspective. But you could see that the way she looked down at people, like you're saying, she was dressed in the best clothing with her leggings and door in the parking lot. When she walks from the lodge of the chief that day, many people move out of her way. That makes her smile, knowing they are beneath her. So it's almost like she just revels at feeling above people. And then the amount of control and she has for, again, it's like the prayers stop. I feel that again, the prayers for the people, the concern for the people. Um, and then you see how it was all kind of very manipulative, but also the powder being used against the chief. I mean, that's the medicine man himself, even all of that being manipulated. It's just, it's, it's
Oh.
really, yeah, it's just seeing it happening that way kind of explains in the beginning part of it, but you see now how kind of in a way was she like more about the power? You know what I mean? Like if you're thinking in that perspective, was she all about the power? It made her smile to be have people beneath her.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, I feel that that's what it is. That she wanted total control, not realizing that the people would actually walk out. I mean, it must have taken them, the village, the hurt that they went through, and to just, pack everything up and leave what they'd known all their life because of one person's manipulative behaviour. It just shows how one person can actually pull a whole village down to the point where they actually leave. And, apart from the fact of controlling somebody through drugs, because that's basically what it is, to have the control over that person's mind.
mhm.
But the powder could also be seen as in another way, like a person will change who they are for the right person saying the right things to them too. So
Yeah.
the powder could be like how someone would be swayed by kind words, or swayed by gifts, or swayed by just general, like somebody just being over attentive to them. Some people will change who they are just because they're getting what they think they want. And then in the end, it really isn't suitable for everybody. Like if they're like leading other people to only think that, oh, I'm getting what I want, just go do whatever everybody else.
Yeah, like
Uh,
Yes.
her talking about the again, she's telling him to expand the lodge. Now, if that's even what she wants, somewhere inside of him though, because you can see it later on when the chief, for all he wanted was to dominate his people. It was taking something and twisting it inside of him, and even that there was something in him that was more about the prestige of it, or at least the vanity of it, and
Yeah.
lost the way of again caring for his people in a way that the expansion of lodge was it for to make her happy, even right down to it could be hypnotic. But when you're hypnotized, a lot of times there's something inside of you that still has that resonance to want to be hypnotized or to want something of a desire, so that hypnosis can latch onto and actually kind of in a way worm its way into your brain.
Mhm.
So we
yeah, he wanted, the chief wanted the beautiful woman and all of that, and he found a way to get it. Or just. But it's the villagers that sort of I like you said, their prayer had gone, their whole life was turned upside down. It's just but it happens in you can see it happening today in different features and parts of things that are happening in the world. That one person's desire can take um, the livelihoods or the lives of other people.
Mhm. I
And
mean,
that's just bringing it into the modern time. We're all supposed to strive for the biggest house and the beautiful wife or husband, and
mhm.
look, being able to I guess, look down on everybody else, be like, my house is bigger than yours. My wife is this good looking and this is my status. When really
Yeah.
we're all sort of just like the villager said, he's not above us and we're not beneath him. We've put in probably more work than what he has. Yeah, he's been there to lead us into this prosperous position, but without us, how far would he have gotten, you know?
Right.
Yeah, they wouldn't be there. Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
He
like,
wouldn't be in that.
she's talking a lot of vain stuff because, okay, one, she's stealing the powder, but also she's saying it's a pitiful village. But yet she's looking at the surface value again. Make it bigger, like you're just saying, make it bigger, make it bigger. It's all about surface value with her because it's a pitiful village, but the village had heart in it, and so not having that prayer, that putting that heart that was in it, that is why people left, because their passion was gone, their passion to want to live, to want to strive as a community, because then it just became working for one person and not working as a community.
mhm.
Yeah. One selfish person or two because of the maiden. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So could we say that maybe maybe if you want to talk like timelines or perspective on timelines, that in another timeline the chief wasn't so grateful towards his people, and maybe they didn't have the most prosperous village in a separate timeline where he was really how the story ended just from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, in that, I mean, he's not, again, like you're saying, he's not prosperous in that just from the beginning. And it could be like we were talking about her showing that perspective. It could even be that she's a mirror. She could be mirroring his emotions in a way. Again, doing hypnosis on a person, there's usually a seed of something within that person's mind, or a lot of times people say that hypnosis goes through a weaker mind. But a weaker mind is about trauma. It's about what is that person not seeing inside themselves in the mirror. Usually that's where what we perceive as weakness, it's just something not being able to emotionally process. So it could be, again, maybe his village wasn't as prosperous. It could be from his point of view, he thinks it's prospering. But even the fact that people are leaving, if they knew the chief and knew who he was, and really, like understood his character, they wouldn't have left. They would have tried to help, even tried to help
Mhm.
unwind him. So
Mm.
what's kind of the underlying there? What was happening with him? Was he not a good leader? It's kind of those questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
look at
From
it
his
as,
perspective,
go ahead,
you're right.
Graham.
From his perspective, everything was just honky dory or just great, and he was the best of leaders, whereas he couldn't see what was going on under the surface because of his mismanagement.
Hmm.
Because you
So
could
yeah.
look at it this way, just think of the story in reverse, like think of the story from how the maiden is there manipulating him, but maybe the maiden isn't really even a real person. Maybe it's just him inside his own brain or his own thoughts saying that he needs to do these things to maintain the facade of when, remember in the beginning of the story, the outside was so glamorous of the lodge and the inside was so miskept.
Hmm.
So maybe we should look at the story from the from the end and then read it to where everybody to where we're just looking at it from basically the outside in and just looking at how dysfunctional things really were until the villagers finally just was like, well, we don't need this, we're just gonna leave. Does
Right.
that make any sense?
Yeah, as much as you're seeing it, like we could even say that he could be this story about the maiden is described. It doesn't even have to be from her point of view. It could be from the point of view of a villager watching or multiple villagers. But what if it was? I mean, if you look at it really, maybe like you're saying, maybe it wasn't everything wasn't all great and splendor and glamorous that it was. And like you can look at it in a way of the maiden maybe just opened people's eyes so that in a way saved them from being continuing in this village. continuing with the what it would look like abuse or just
with the
authoritarian.
with the facade of everything's hunky dory over here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple different ways to look at it.
Yeah. It's amazing how different everyone's perspective can't get the word out, perspective on it can be. And I think some of the perspectives too can come from the fact that we're different ages, different genders, and that it gives us a whole different overview of what we can see within those words.
Mm-hmm.
From a younger person's point of view to an older person's point of view, and our different lifestyles, our different countries that we live in, it all can change the perspective that little bit to make it to the person a totally different story.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so.
And that's what's so great about telling the old stories, or even coming up with your own stories that are taking bits and pieces from older stories and putting a new spin on them, be it more of a modern spin or even taking it back to how the stories are originally written and told. You're able to spin a web of countless possibilities on how somebody could take the story or even apply the story to their daily lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet they're all again. It's like a piece of truth. It's kind of what, if people aren't aware, within the podcast I was posted. I believe it was either earlier today or yesterday about perspectives. So looking at that like sphere, and then you get the one side and you think it's a circle, but yet when you look at it from a different angle, it's actually it's a square. It's shaped as a square. But looking at it from a third angle, it's shaped as a triangle. So it's all of them have the truth in it. It's a piece of it, but when you start piecing it all together, then you get this fuller spectrum. You get a wider scope in order for us to see more, to understand more, understand each other more.
Yes, ma'am.
So, do we want to do the new series then?
It's up to you, bro. You're the conductor here.
I'm the recorder. I'm R2D2 and 3CPO at this point.
We just do something like the Wendigo.
Does everybody know like what the Wendigo is? That's the thing about that, is that most people don't look into the It's supposed to be mythology, when really it's more of a historical being.
Well, if you want to explain it, I mean, I know, but I don't know if our viewers would know it. So
Exactly. That's why I'm like, that's just popped into my brain, into my head. I was like, most people
I didn't even give that a thought.
Most people wouldn't know what that is, because most people don't look into the mythology of Native American culture there, buddy. Like, I'm able to tell that to like Grandma and Jeff and whoever, because they actually know it. I've like explained it and sort of went into detail about it and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I know about it, and again, you may fill me in more, but it's basically a soul or a person who's, in a way, consumed flesh to the point where they transform into a creature that basically consumes flesh, becomes a hunter in itself. Is that correct assessment?
Yeah. So that's one of the many explanations of what, Jeff?
It's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, that is. And then there's even the mythology of the Wendigo being an everlasting being, I guess, to where there wasn't just one. There are, even to this day, hundreds of them around, because I heard from my people that in 2019 there was supposedly a young man, I think he was like 27, 28 or something, and he attacked a bunch of people on a Greyhound bus in Wisconsin or something. And they said that he was acting like a Wendigo would act because there was like a bunch of like native people on that bus, and so they knew what to look for. You know?
So the embodiment of the spirit of one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wait, why do they want to kill him?
Wendigo is said to be always hungry, even though because they look malnourished, they look like skin and bones, basically.
Yes.
When they're in true Wendigo form, they're basically like skin and bones, and most of the time the skin isn't in the like healthiest of condition, and so that's why a lot of people don't really know what they look like, because how do you describe that to somebody when they haven't seen it or haven't heard about it? You know?
They're like a skin and bones malnourished human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Family members getting old, that type of thing.
Yeah, but this is like nightmare fuel to like the millionth degree sort of thing. Like the worst thing that you could imagine a person looking like, you know.
That's almost like the Rougarou. Which
yeah, that's the southern equivalent to the Rougarou, is that you can turn into a Rougarou, similar to how you can turn into a Wendigo is by being bitten.
So kind of like a werewolf type thing. If you're bitten, you would turn into one. Okay.
That's one of the myths or legends or however you would put it. Because I wrote that story after seeing this thing on about the Rougarou on television.
Oh, okay.
And so I went, you know how you fall down the rabbit hole, and yeah.
Which, you want to go really down the rabbit hole with the Rougarou and its similarities to like even werewolf, because sometimes we're described as human body but the head of a wolf or a dog, which now goes into so many different mythologies. I mean, you could tie that to a lot of Norse mythology. The Vikings, Odin had his they would call them the berserkers, and they usually fight with wolf skin or bear skin on them, and that's kind of where some of the myths of werewolves came from as well, because they would fight in such, like, they would just go in berserker rage. They would go into rage mode to the point where they just tore anything apart. But if you go even back further, again, the dog's head with human body, you're talking about like Anubis from like the Book of the Dead here, Egyptian mythology. The eater of hearts, eater of souls. So yeah. So it's like you see where it's all tied together.
And even in my story, even in the Warrioress story that I wrote, one of the things that she takes from her father's stuff when she's sneaking out of the village is a black wolf. I guess it'd be like a cape or something. And she wears that to sneak out of the village.
Interesting. All right.
Because nobody can see her. Right? Because she's covered in.
Yeah.
So it's like a cloak.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are just blowing my mind right now. Fantastic.
But yeah.
So let's do the Wendigo one. And the way we've been doing these is because usually our stories are 3 parts, sometimes 4. We've been leaving it a bit of a cliffhanger at the end, so somebody who would want to hear the end of the story would come back in the next podcast, or they can join the story time. They can join story time. They can come in through our server here, the Unity Project Up one, or you can go into Chiefs. He's got the Winds of Time. He's got that one, Tales of the Winds of Time. We could go through that server if you're comfortable, and I'll post whatever links that you guys are comfortable with me posting there. So.
Well, you have capacity to because I updated your role in the servers. I did that when I was working on that one story at like 3 a.m. So yeah.
that's where those stories came from. Again, because I see them, playing out in my space and in my head, and I'm going, "Why am I dreaming about this?" Oh, okay, I see you in the library. I get it.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do the Wendigo one, and we'll do part 1 and 2.
That's in 2 parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have to find it. Okay, there it is. So we can close that one. We can close that one. We'll go to Wendigo Part 1.
Yep, I've got that up.
Good for you, Grandma.
Well, we went and found it because I was trying to figure out where the hell it was. Are you going to describe what a Wendigo is before you go into the
we're
story?
going to be like, if you'd like to know more, you can research it or come onto the Discord and we will explain it.
Yeah, okay.
That way we get them to, because I think I go into good enough description about it.
Yeah.
In another story. Yep. And then, yeah. But if you want, I can describe it.
No, that's all right. It'll, as you said, if you give, if they want to find out more about the Wendigo, check out some of the stories from our culture,
or
Native American culture.
Or they can come in here, and again, we can have a group chat.
Yeah, exactly.
Come and ask the questions.
Ask the question.
Are
you worthy? What do you have to give us to make it to the afterlife?
Do you want potatoes or potatoes?
I don't want no potatoes. I had potatoes this morning for breakfast.
Oh dear.
Then the other night I made pork chops and potatoes for supper.
Oh. I'm going to have chicken and coleslaw for my dinner. I was going to have that last night, but I worked so hard yesterday that I fell asleep, and it was only a phone call at 8:30 last night that woke me up.
I think.
And then I didn't feel like cooking dinner.
Was it last? No, it was the night before. I fell asleep at like 8 o'clock. Ended up messaging Rose because I had a weird dream.
Yeah.
At like 2 in the morning, like midnight. I was like, this is weird.
Dreaming in the library.
But yeah, that's a story for another time.
Yes.
Yeah, I try not to message you guys.
I try not to dream
when it in the middle of the night, middle of your night,
I'm usually up till like 1, 2 in the morning, unless because I have all these things.
How much I would get it. I don't have my phone's on silent, but again, the way the library works, somehow I'm getting your message because I will pick it up and read it in my dream, and then I will literally pop awake and see your message actually on my phone. And I've had people, spirit guides, come and wake me up in the middle of the night to be like, "Hey, I'm giving you a message," and I'm like, "All right, it's the middle of the night, but okay." So, all right. So we'll continue. You have the floor, Chief.
Okay. So this is the Wendigo series, which will be going into the next book, which should be published sometime this coming year. This is Wendigo Part 1. And if you haven't really looked into Native American culture, now would be a good time to join the Discord so that we can give you a more in-depth storyline about what a Wendigo is and what they look like and why they're around and all that sort of thing, because it's kind of hard to put into words in such a short time. This is Wendigo Part 1. Our story is one of many that float on the winds of time. Our story begins in a village that for many days has slowly turned to months of the people living in fear for the nights that passed in the village. For the nights had passed. For the nights had passed in the village, many people had gone missing, with no cause for these disappearances being discovered, which in turn caused the people from the youngest to the oldest living there to be frightened to even leave their lodges during the day, let alone at night, no matter how many people were walking throughout the village. It is said that it was this day that will forever be told by the storytellers, because it tells of how one man survived an encounter with one of native legend's most feared and monstrous creatures to ever be talked about in any tribe that has ever existed. Legend tells of many origins of this creature, from a lost hunter who was forced to eat the flesh of a human to survive, to the warrior who sacrificed his soul to become the creature to aid his tribe in defending themselves from their enemies, only to be cast out after the fighting was done. But the most infamous story of this creature is the man who killed and ate his family. The truth of that story only being discovered after recounting his story of the fate of his family, when the man came into town after he and his family had not been heard from in many days due to the severe snowstorm that had prevented travel to the small town that they lived near. And he had led a party of men back to his family home to recover the bodies that he had said had died of starvation, but only to be discovered to have been shot and chopped menacingly, with pieces missing from the corpses. But these stories we'll save for another time, for we must focus on the one and only time a man met this creature in combat and lived to tell the tale of his encounter to his people. Word had spread throughout the village that the people the village had lost had no doubt been taken by the hideous beast that few people dared to talk of, and that from the counsel of the medicine man, the village chief had learned that the only way to rid themselves of the creature's wrath that was that one of the village's warriors must go out during the night when the creature was most likely to be wandering about looking for its next victim and challenge it to a battle. The people learned this at a village meeting in the village square, and it is said that after all the village's bravest warriors declined to take up the burden of this battle, that legend tells of a warrior who had accomplished many feats in battle and was said to never leave the field of battle until all on his side had left before him. This warrior was a towering man, standing well over 6 foot with the strength that no man could match when it came to battle. This man was recognized war chief of the village, for he had seen many battles and had never failed to show just how brave of heart and spirit he was. This man, who is one of legend's most legendary warriors, who is easily distinguishable from a black handprint that adorned his face on a daily basis, the mark of a man who had proved his prowess in battle countless times. It was this man who had raised his hand and offered to do what many men in the village wouldn't, seeing this as just another sacrifice he would need to make for his people. And if he were to fall in this battle, it would be seen as not only a noble feat in doing so, but also as his greatest contribution to his people and a fitting end to his legendary life. And so after all the people had offered him words of encouragement and thanks, they all went back to their lodges, and the great warrior had returned to his lodge to gather the things he needed for the fight ahead. To be continued.
Makes me want to see the battle.
What do you think? Did we build enough drama in that first part? And those stories that were at the beginning, those are actual stories that you can look up, and they will look up through history, because I wanted realism. So I looked up actual stories of things that happen throughout history.
Yeah.
Yeah, unusual encounters like that. Yeah. bit gruesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
So, what do you think
It-
about the first part of it?
Sets the stage, and it also explains a bit about like kind of where a Wendigo would come from, and again the way to again confront the Wendigo, but how, you know, like, I mean, like, you're going up against something that would be a formidable predator. It has the, in a way, knowledge of a human being. So the thought process of it's not the same as a thought process of, say, you would say an animal.
Yeah.
But yet also the hunger of something that is starving.
Sort of like the
Yeah, and
viciousness of an animal.
Yeah,
yeah, no matter how much it feeds, that hunger's never sated.
right.
Oh.
So it's got to keep going.
So should we go on to the next part?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. This is Wendigo Part 2. Having gathered all his best equipment of battle and checking to make sure that everything was in working order, the warrior sits waiting for the sun to leave the sky, sharpening his knife and tomahawk. That would be the only weapons he would take with him to this fight. Once he gets both instruments of battle to razor sharpness, he rises from his seat in his lodge and lights a small torch that will be his only light to see what will happen on the field of battle, and slowly walks about 100 yards from the village entrance and begins to beat a small drum that was slung from a small rawhide sling on his back and begins to sing a song of battle. His chosen field of battle is a clearing surrounded by trees, and it is while singing that his keen ears hear a rustling and a ragged breath coming from the brush and trees ahead of him. Just out of just out of the light of his small torch that is stuck into the ground at his feet, his eyes lock onto the place of the noise, knowing it is the monster. The warrior commands it to come forward and meet him in battle with a loud war cry that echoes through the air. His it is when it it is when with this roar that would make even the bravest man run, the creature from legend steps forward, standing about 7 feet tall, with rags hanging from its form and a hood that hides its face from view. But what is visible atop its head is a large elk skull with horns covered in what appears to be human blood and flesh, for they appear to be an abnormal color, unlike any horns the warrior had seen in his many years hunting, let alone living on Mother Earth. As the creature comes into the light of the small torch, the warrior sees that its arms hang to its knees as it walks forward in a hunched over posture with a staff in one hand that it appears to lean on as it advances. Its ragged breath and clicking of its teeth the only sounds that come from it. Not flinching, the great warrior stands his ground and actually advances towards the creature, his knife in one hand and tomahawk in the other. Knowing this fight is going to be an up-close one. You will take no more persons from this village, the warrior declares to the beast. Legend then tells that with this, the creature with inhuman speed rushes the warrior, and that as the creature comes within range, the warrior with practiced hand and reflexes from many battles he'd been in his many years fighting his enemies, swings his tomahawk, and as metal meets bone from the swing, finding its mark on the creature's body, as the foes stand feet from each other, is when the first strike is struck by the warrior. With this, the creature grabs and throws the warrior several feet backwards, where he lands with a thud. The creature stands where they met and rips the tomahawk from its chest and drops it to the ground. A thick black liquid begins to drip to the ground, covering the rags that cover the creature's chest. The creature, outraged by this show of non-fear, then lets out another monstrous roar that makes the trees and brush vibrate. Again rushes towards the warrior and is on top of him in the blink of an eye. Its long fingers snake around his forearms as it holds him to the ground. He struggles to hold it at bay with all his strength, its ragged breath smelling of rotten meat and droplets of blood drip onto the warrior's face as it snaps its jaws, trying to rip into the flesh of his face. The warrior, with all his strength, throws the creature from him and rushes to his tomahawk that lays on the ground where he'd first struck the creature. His knife having been lost in the struggle to keep the beast from tearing the flesh from his face. As he reaches his tomahawk, he turns in time to see the creature once again coming at him. And again, with practiced hand and a final swing of the tomahawk, he hits the creature in the neck, causing a great splatter of black fluid to hit the ground and splattered the chest and face of the great warrior. And for the beast to fall to the ground, apparently dead. This is when the warrior realizes that the sun had begun to fill the sky and that the battle had lasted all night, even though it appeared to have only taken minutes. To be continued.
That was very cool, Steve.
Yes. I like, okay, so I do like the description of him too, but again, even just you can see the battle. And he's just fighting again, and he's swinging at the creature. And then the black fluid, that's funny, to hit the ground and splatter the chest and face of the great warrior. And again, it's funny how you're describing it, and yet it reminds me of another myth of Sir Nunos, which is a Celtic myth, which is called the Horned Deity, and basically it's described in the same thing. He's wearing like elk horns, and sometimes they describe him of the god of life as well as the god of life and death, but also rebirth. So it's almost in a way this, again, you're talking about hunger, but you're talking about this fight between it, and again, that even like the black stuff that's coming out of him. It's funny, and I mean, he's called the Horn One, but which is also again something that is with like Norse mythology and Odin. So you're talking about, again, we've talked about the werewolf and the Wendigo being more in the line with a werewolf type mentality, but then also the way you're describing him as a horned one, which is a classic way that you describe a Wendigo. And it's funny how that all ties together. Even the warrior himself, again, he's fighting this entity, and it's basically, are you fighting hunger? You're fighting and death in a way. So having that all, and even I believe it was part of one of the stories with the horned one. He leads the spirits for the wild hunt. So it's funny how, again, like Wild Hunt, this hunting mentality and having people disappear. People who were targeted by the Wild Hunt, same thing. They would disappear from their village. People just didn't hear from them again. But yeah, it's very fun. It's like a whole battle. I like this. This is awesome.
What do you think, Kiwi?
She's muted.
Are you sure you want to save the third part for the next? Or do you want to find out what happens at the end?
It would be a nice cliffhanger. But it is like right in the heat of battle.
Yeah.
Now, what I find with it, like Rosemary said, that, I've read a lot of mythology over the years, and it's amazing how in each, a lot of the countries, it's the same creature or being, but under a different name. It's, so what's the common thread? Is it that each one of the countries, like the Norwegian, the Norse myths, the English myths and all of that, they have their one-horned creature or they're werewolf or whatever. And, you look at the mythology and you've got to really think how much truth is in that. And is that same thing happening today under a different disguise?
Uh-huh.
Because just that the fact that it goes throughout the mythology, and usually there's a basis of truth in most mythology when you really look at it.
Yeah, especially in the more oral tradition of storytelling.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't come up with that story out of nowhere.
No, and hearing that story and like Rose said, listening and knowing the Norse myths and the Odin stories and all of that. So there is a common denominator in it somewhere. Whether it's the fact that when maybe people starve and they lose all conscious being and end up being a cannibal, and or is it that it's good versus evil, or just lots of different little aspects that can be brought into it. And then you look at what's happening with people in this day and age, and you've got to wonder if there's not some of them creatures still around in our timelines.
Uh-huh. Well, you come see me here where I live, Grandma, and I'll go drive you around, and I could show you that some, if not all of the old myths, supposedly, are still around, because I've seen some things even in my short 32 years here on Mother Earth. I've seen some things.
I mean, and that's it's where it's tied together again. Think of the myths go even older than that, older than again Viking stuff. It goes back to you're talking Anatolia and Ugarit myths about I think it's Reshef, which would be again a deer-headed god, but he was also one of the ones caused by plagues and wars. So if you think about again, you have this ravenous hunger and flesh and rotting flesh. You would see that in a war. You would see that again even in a plague. He's wearing rotted flesh, kind of tatters on him. So even those, what they were called lesser deities, but they were still called these gods or mythologies of them, or same things playing out in other myths. So it's around the world.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of something comparable that we would have in our mythology down here in New Zealand.
There's probably something.
Yeah. Well, I know we have one, the Tanafa, but he lives in water.
No.
Yeah, and he's one of our mythological creatures of myth.
Yeah. Sort of in your mythology collection library thing.
Yeah.
Because here that would be even in most Native American cultures, that would be the water baby, which I have experienced with. But yeah, that's another story. More personal thing. That's why you don't go driving around at night around lakes and rivers and stuff, especially around here. But I had to learn that the hard way.
And yet that's some of my most peaceful.
Why don't you drive around lakes and rivers?
Because of the water baby. Because most people, when they drive out to a river or a lake, they want to go swimming, right?
Okay.
But you don't go swimming at night because the water baby might get you.
That's the
It's yeah. The water baby is akin to the basket lady. That's why you don't misbehave at night, because the basket lady will come and take you and make her bread out of your bones.
It's kind of like the sirens. If you go in the water, and sometimes if you've done something bad, they can, if you're swimming under the water.
What?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, okay.
And yet
So,
I find my most peaceful times.
I'll
the
bug you
one
guys about this right now. Like, did any of you guys see? Like, it was like a cable television show, right? Called
uh,
Mermaids. I'm sure I've talked about this before.
yeah.
Discovery Channel, and they did mermaids.
And then even at that, even in the like, I looked into that because the Uto Aztecans, the people that live down there in like Brazil and all that, they have legends about their some of their people's like diverting off and going into the water, and that's why there is mermaids and all that. That's actually a real thing that you ask around down there and they'll tell you, yeah, we believe that some of our people did
Dude.
go and live
Right.
in the water because they felt that that was a safer place for them or they could actually do it.
Mm.
Silkies that go to seals in a lot of the European mythology.
Yeah.
But I find sometimes my most peaceful times are when I'm pulled up beside a stream or the sea, a running creek.
But I don't think any you'll have to worry about water babies, Grandma. I think that's just over here in
Only up in the northern hemisphere.
yeah, over in here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that
yeah.
opens this opens the book up for all the cryptic stuff that you see, like the Sasquatch, Yeti, and then you also have what people have called the sea monsters.
I actually wrote a story about an encounter with Sasquatch
Nice.
with the same main character, with the same warrior, because not to play spoiler or anything, they went out hunting in a place where they shouldn't have went hunting, and they in Pacific North West belief um, the Bigfoot or whatever you want, Sasquatch or whatever, was able to talk to the native people because they shared that bond. And it wasn't until one of the tribes people killed one of the Bigfoot for taking something that bond was lost. And now that's why they can no longer understand them because they broke that bond, which is something that I was thinking about writing a story about, but I decided to go more towards the protector of the woods sort of thing. That's what the Woodsman series is about. Is the woodsman being the protector of the woods, and a couple of the people in the hunting party didn't respect it and went and did some things that they shouldn't have, and everybody else in the party ended up paying for it. Because every action has a reaction, which causes consequences.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't understand all that, but I'll say, hey, take the trees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Protect the wood.
Because even here, probably like maybe like an hour and a half. That's where we would go hunting, and it's sort of off the beaten trail, but it's also where the mountains are. And so ever since I was able to go with my uncle and them, we would always try to get off the mountain before it was dark, because in said place the legend is he's an old miner, because they used to mine like silver and stuff up in the mountains, and there's even like gold up there, they say. And so they said just to get a more personal story, my uncle, my cousin, and my other cousin, they broke down coming off that mountain, and they had to walk off. It's probably about a mile and a half to get to the bottom, and it was dark, and they said that they could hear something following them and throwing rocks and tree and like branches and stuff. But they had their rifles, and like my uncle had a flashlight, but it would always stay out of sight of the flashlight. But they could just feel that something was following them all the way to the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah, that would not be a nice sensation. It would not be nice at all.
Yeah.
But again, each place in the world has its stories of this, this type of creature.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, I sort of think if I'd love to know where it all ties in together. How did those stories get from one continent to another?
Because somebody experienced the
Back
same
in the
sort of thing.
days, yeah, back in the days when there was no such thing as internet and things like that, and yet these stories, with using a different name, are the same around the world. So, were the stories thrown out in the astral plane?
It just is, right?
Well, it's actually more of, if you think of this multiversal sense, like we're in different vibrations. So the more, again, we've talked about it before, is people think of heaven and hell, but they're just vibrations. Hell is the fear survival mode vibration, whereas heaven is more of this blissful and unified balanced vibration. So when you're in a different vibrational field, a different, even again, we're sliding in and out of a multiverse, we're on separate quantum fields. You're talking about, again, observing a story that, what if it's just something, again, like, even like we talk about Bigfoot is, and I've actually watched a lot of people who I know somebody in the Blue Ridge Mountain, watch some of those videos to know that, again, it's an interdimensional being. They do affect electronics, they do telepathy as well, the Bigfoot's there. So it's could be even safe to say that they exist in a different radio station, or a different bandwidth, a different vibrational pattern, and would mean that we're overlapping them. Gaia has multiple overlapping vibrations
and that's why there's only fleeting glimpses, is because we're only able to break through that so-called veil for that split second. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's how you are vibrating in tune with it. And I'm gonna honestly say I've had a vision of Cernunnos before, and it was kind of, in a way, scary, but it was something to do with a raven sitting on a skull, and in this vision, it was an elk head, but it was white like that, almost like a skull. And in the vision, all I kept hearing was this noise that was almost hypnotic to draw me in closer. And I kept feeling like it just didn't feel right. Like, it didn't sit right in my stomach to be that hypnotic, to draw closer to this entity. But it was like this, it was just this really weird sound. And this was an actual vision I had, but it was connected to somebody else that was previously in here a long time ago, a couple years ago. And they passed through our server, and not knowing that she was connected to the Greek mythologies herself, and that she had that as one of her patron gods. So I'm like, okay, so now I understand why I was seeing it. But just the hypnotic quality. So if you think of hypnosis, again, you can kind of see the similarities, but at the same time, especially in hypnosis, you still have your own perception. So there's similarities or common threads, but then how are we perceiving it? Just like I said, story we call Babylon. It's basically what happened is we all are split into different perspectives. So we're trying to describe something, just like the elephant story. I feel a rat's tail. I feel, it's an alligator's skin because it's rough. They're all touching it and they're blind, the three blind men, but yet they're describing one thing, one entity, one actual being. And yet what they're feeling is true, but it's all slightly different.
Yeah.
But, it comes back to each of us have an individual perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing word, that, isn't it? Perspectives.
Yes.
We can all come up with such different thoughts and meanings to something, because that's the way our minds function.
But with that, Rose, I really want you to hear the ending of this story.
We can do that.
I think that you'll really like it.
Okay, so let's do the ending.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have clever titles for these ones, so yeah. It's just the Wendigo Part 3. Sorry.
maybe so. That we know where we're at when you've got them set and numbered for us.
Okay. This is Wendigo Part 3. Our story is one of many that float on the winds of time. It tells of a legendary warrior who, like on many nights before, sat telling his grandchildren of the battle he had with a vicious creature who some still say only exists in myth and legend. But you must ask yourself, if this creature is only a word and story, then how is it that so many people have encountered this creature throughout history? But as always, that is another story for another time. In this story, we find the legendary warrior inside his lodge sitting on his stool, telling his grandchildren about his battle with the legendary creature. The children sit in a circle around around the now elderly warrior. Their reaction to the story never change, no matter how many times they hear it. But it is this night that the oldest of the grandchildren asks, "Grandfather, weren't you at all scared to fight this beast?" The warrior shifts on his stool, then after a deep breath tells the children, "Of course I was scared, grandson, but I knew I had to do it to keep your grandmother and the rest of the people in the village safe. So I went that night, and if I had fallen while battling the beast, then it would have been for the best reason a man could give his life." With this, the grandchildren nod, for this was something their grandfather had always made sure to instill in them, that every act, every story, every life should have a purpose. For a man or woman without purpose is one who simply exists, and it is not true and is not truly living their life. It is then that grandmother interrupts the story circle to tell the children that it is time for them to go to bed. And after much grumbling about not being tired and other protests, the children leave the room after giving their grandparents a hug and kiss. Now alone, the man has only his thoughts and memories of past battles to think about. His body forever scarred from a life defending his people. The end.
Yep. Exactly what we were discussing, sort of pre you coming into the third part, not knowing exactly what the third part was. It's,
How the stories continue.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But that's sort of not where I would have thought the story would have gone. Yeah, I thought maybe it would have gone down a different track. Like, he defeated the Wendigo, but he was shunned by his tribe because he had actually been in physical contact with the being. So I mean that's another possibility that could have gone that way instead of him being at home in his lodge with his grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know, it's yeah.
But it's like, how would the story continue if somebody wasn't there to tell it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just amazing the way our minds can think.
I think that's a good ending.
I do.
Shows that he lived to be an old man, and
Yeah,
he
I do
knew
too.
he had all
Yeah.
those little nuggets of wisdom to give his grandchildren.
Yeah, but it's still not sort of the ending that I
You don't
was.
like the ending? Is that what you're saying, Grandma? Come on now.
No, I do like the ending. I do like the ending, but it's not. Knowing your mind at times, it's not the ending I was thinking we'd go down. I was thinking, as I said, more of a he was ostracized, because of his actually being in physical contact with a being like that.
But how do we know that he? How do we know that he even told what happened? Maybe he just was like, "Well, I hit it a couple times, and then the sun came up, and it was all over. It just laid there." But how do we know that it died? How do we know that it just left that physical being and went back to wherever it was that it was from.
That's
Well,
interesting.
we don't.
That's
We don't.
interesting
Because you never.
because
Yeah.
in the Sir Nuno's myth, when you try to kill it, it's rebirth. It's reborn as a baby, and it starts all over again.
Yeah.
So that is
It's
interesting. You don't know.
no, we don't. I assumed because it had its neck chopped that its head must have just about been chopped off.
But it said apparently dead. It didn't say it died.
Right?
Come on, you
Yeah,
got to the
true.
story.
Well, if we go, and then even with I think, again, we've seen on television with the Wendigo, how it was, but it didn't like fire. Now that actually does go with the Sir Nuno myth because it was the Sir Nuno's myth, but also the previous ones, like I said, Reshep, they were called the flamed ones. The ones that were inflamed, which you think of hunger is this ravenous flame type mentality, like she just wants to keep eating and eating and eating, like burning like a flame. So some of those myths start tying together, but like you said, you cut the head off, but what if it respawns? What if it's fire that kills it? So we don't know.
Yeah.
Makes you want to be vigilant when you go outside now.
That's why I don't go outside.
Not at night.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I love going out looking and watching the stars and
Grandma, if you lived where I live, you would understand why I don't go outside.
I do understand why you don't go out knowing where you do live.
That's a story for another time.
Yeah, that is. But as I said, I must actually have a really good look into some of the mythology, like that, here in New Zealand, because I have heard, I've heard a lot of Maori mythology, and most of it's to do with, a lot of it's to do with like how our kiwi lost its feathers and things like that. And maybe it's just because I've never.
Not about things that
It's
go
not where
up in
my
the night.
mind. Yeah. It's not where my mind likes to go, so therefore I don't actually acknowledge the bump in the night things. Yeah, you're right. Oh, it's good that we can all sort of have different
That's
thoughts
one of
on things like this.
That was one of my grandma's favorite things was to tell me, especially at night, because we would spend like 3-4 hours. She'd tell me a story, and then she'd tell me another story, and then another story. She'd be like, "You remember the story that I told you at the beginning when we first started talking?" I was like, "I think so." And then she's like, "Well, tell it back to me, and if you get anything wrong, you don't get any more stories." And so I would have to sit there and try to. Well, if you're going to be told the stories, you gotta be able to remember and tell them when somebody you can't just be like, well, I'm just going to tell you the story that I most recently heard. I'm going to tell you a story that's been bouncing around inside my head for a while.
Yeah.
That's what she was doing, was having me recall even like the most important parts of the story, because if you can give a person an overview, like you could be like, oh yeah, well, I've heard about this story, but I can only tell you certain parts of it, so that person will have an idea if they go looking for it, that they're reading the one that they want to read or want to hear, or so that's what she was doing. It wasn't in a mean thing. It was just, well, I told you this and I want you to retain it, so tell it to me, sort of thing.
Yeah. And the teaching
and Grandma was vicious.
capabilities.
Grandma was vicious. If you even got like one sentence wrong, like you missed part of something, there was no more stories.
And then would she renege and tell you some stories to see if you've actually can remember this time?
No, there was no more stories. That was the end of story time. And so I'd have to go find something else to do.
Yeah, but like on a further day, a further a month down the track, sort of thing?
No,
Did she yeah?
because we
retell
would
you
try and
stories?
do it. We would try and do it almost every day. That way,
Yeah.
I got to where I was able to. And then she would really mess with me when we would tell a story one day, and then she would be like, "You remember the story from yesterday?" That's when she really messed with me because I would have to sort through like 4 or 5 stories and be like, "Yeah, yeah," and then she would pick the one that was in the middle. She would pick them. She wouldn't
Yeah.
pick the beginning story or the end story, the ones that would really stick with you. She would pick the middle story, the one where
Yeah.
you're just sitting there listening. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's sort
She
of.
was making sure.
yeah,
Yeah. It's but it shows that that's also would have been teaching you concentration, as well as getting your memory skills active.
uh-huh,
That seems to be missing in a lot of today's youth.
uh-huh.
The concentration times that they have, I think scientifically it's been proved that it's nowhere near what it was, 20 years ago.
Yeah, because we could be talking and then it'll just pop in my brain. Well, I have a story that could bring some light into that, but sometimes I just
Yeah.
don't tell you. I'm just like, oh, well, I can tell that story, but let's just keep talking,
Mm.
He writes it down.
Yeah.
He jots it
Yeah.
down for later somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Or we could be
Yeah.
talking and then I could get an idea for a story and then,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. That's happened several times that I
but
know of.
that's just
Yeah.
how
How
I
you.
work. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm able to take bits and pieces. Like, when I read a story or something, and then I could read my own story and get a piece of information from that, and then I could be like, well, I could write a whole different story with this little bit of information and make a whole nother series out of it.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 But I think, what I was saying about the scientific side of things, they reckon that's why TikTok is so appealing to young people because it's
Because
short.
it's so short. Yeah.
Yeah. And therefore they're not getting practice in the longer thinking skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sort of, it's a bit of a scary thought to think that, if they're driving along the road and they've only got a 3-minute concentration span, what's going to happen?
Well, I just go the next extreme and I just go down all the rabbit holes. Oh, that's how this is connected to this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. Then we bring it all back to the beginning. We're like, yeah, that's where, it's connected to this myth. It's connected to that one. And every part of it, like even just like you said, the description, again, like the flesh, the hanging off type way. Again, it goes back to, like I was saying, the Odin myth. They'd wear skins on them, and they would go in berserker mode, and there was no way you could stop them. And they would be virile while they're doing it. Obviously, they're running around with raging stuff going on, and they're just going right into battle. They're in the heat of it, and that's why it was like straight into it. I think they even called, were they war dogs? They were called the, like, fight like the wolves. That's what a lot of Odin's warriors were about. So I mean, and that's just one myth among, I don't even know, countless how many others, and how many other stories are lost because people, the tribes got wiped out. You even have Mongolian myths that are, they're not, some are there and some aren't. Some of them are gone because of just the remoteness of the area. So, which aren't truly gone because they're on the winds of time.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Everything floats on the winds of time, but
Yeah.
things cannot float forever.
Correct. With that, I'm going to end the recording and then we can keep talking if you'd like. So, if anybody would want to hear more in story time, hear more about, even like you said, you had that one story about the Bigfoot. If you'd like to get information about purchasing Chief's book, or if you'd like to hear more story time, you're more than welcome to join either one of our Discords here. And I will post this one as soon as I am able out of here. And I'm thanking you guys for coming, and thanks Jeff for coming in. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll catch you next time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll catch you next time on the Winds of Time.
Yes.